It felt like the world stopped breathing the moment Julia and Brandon realized their baby's life was hanging by a thread. One day, they were new parents sharing sleepy smiles over late-night bottles. The next, they were gripping each other in a sterile hospital hallway, begging for a miracle while their only child fought for every breath. No one saw it coming. There weren't any morning alarms, no warning sirens, just a cough that sounded like every other stuffy night, until it didn't. Baby Damon's fever crept up until suddenly it was roaring, and what started as a mild case of sniffles spiraled into full panic mode. Nurses rushed, machines beeped, doctors spoke in code, and two terrified parents watched the medical team swarm around their tiny son, clinging to hope as the nightmare unfolded right in front of them. Have you ever wondered how fast everything can collapse, how a family's entire beginning could balance on a single lab result, a single shallow breath? You look at Julia and Brandon, remembered mostly for their messy fights, bumpy romance, and the almost comedic chaos of 90 Day Fiance, and suddenly it all feels so real. Their public drama always felt like something happening to someone else, until the stakes went way past sleeping arrangements and in-laws, and hit the only spot that matters. This is pain you can't mute or scroll past. Julia's face said it all. Complete shock, no script, no filters, only the raw panic of a mother watching helplessly as her baby is rushed onto breathing support, the sounds of medical machines cutting through the fragile quiet of the pediatric floor. The timeline barely made sense. Just weeks earlier, Julia and Brandon were finally living the stable life they'd always craved. No more overbearing parents or reality TV meddling. They had finally escaped the farm, finally moved into their own place, finally gotten used to seeing Damon's bright blue eyes stare back at them each morning. It should have been the happy ending to every mess, every leaked secret and late-night fight, every time fans had written them off as doomed. Yet in a single midnight crisis, all of that security vanished, replaced by cold fear and questions you can't prepare for. Why did this happen to them, after everything else? Is this the twist that finally pushes them over the edge? Or will facing the unimaginable force them to rewrite their story again? If you think you know where this family goes next, think twice, because what happened behind those hospital doors changed everything in one night. Nobody ever accused Julia and Brandon of keeping things boring. Their story still makes people argue in the comment section. Remember the way they met? A random video call, some wild dancing in a club, a long-distance crush that should have fizzled out, except it didn't. Instead, it turned into a whirlwind romance complete with international flights, messy paperwork, and a mountain of risk. Then came the farm drama. City girl Julia, thrown onto rural Virginia land, dragging herself out of bed to feed chickens before sunrise, all while dealing with Brandon's parents, who brought a whole new meaning to the word boundaries. Viewers couldn't look away. It was like watching reality TV gold, an overbearing mom, a son who couldn't say no, a fiance plotting escape after her 100th farm chore, and love trying to grow in the middle of it all. The bickering was almost a sport, the awkward energy at every family dinner table hard to forget. And then, like every iconic couple on reality TV, came the betrayals and bombshells. Julia confessing she'd kissed her ex way back in Russia, right when Brandon was maxing out credit cards to secure her visa. Brandon hiding spare keys from Julia, almost inviting his parents back into their supposedly private life. Their big fights weren't about who forgot to buy milk. It was about broken trust, loyalty put to the test, and whether love could survive in a house full of secrets. Just when you thought they might finally figure things out, something crashed down from the ceiling and knocked the peace away. The crazy part? This was exactly why people kept watching. Not because they were perfect, but because no matter how messy, it always felt honest. Yet behind all the drama, there's something most fans never see. When the cameras turn off, no amount of Instagram flexing or snarky tell-all post can prepare you for real life hitting this hard. By the time Julia and Brandon actually carved out privacy of their own, they seemed different. Less frantic, a bit older but happier. Past scandals faded into the background noise, replaced by late-night feedings and tired, content smiles. Bringing Damon into the world felt like a cosmic joke, a reward after years of stress, a way to finally put roots down, and move on from the old chaos. But the illusion didn't last. Instead of long walks, cuddle sessions, and quiet family breakfasts, one cough started to echo through their home, the kind you convince yourself is nothing serious. Julia and Brandon took turns measuring temperatures at 2 in the morning, telling themselves every new parent goes through this. Still, that worry in the back of the mind grew louder. Fever, fussiness, restless nights, something in that tiny baby face losing its spark. They looked back at each other, replaying every anxious late-night fight from years before, and realized this was different. No petty arguments, no blame game. All that mattered was getting through the next hour. What do you tell yourself at that point? That the worst is over, right? But when the simple remedies stop working and the baby starts struggling to breathe, the scary truth is suddenly impossible to ignore. In a moment, the new house, the patched-up marriage, all of it faded. Fear took over, sharp and absolute. They rushed to the ER, unprepared for the cold white lights, the rush of voices, the look on the doctor's face that said this was no regular fever. Julia and Brandon's world, built from years of mess and second chances, slipped completely out of their hands, right as the stakes hit their highest. And if you think this night ended with an easy fix, think again, because nobody was ready for what happened once Damon was rolled away behind those double doors. There's a moment in every hospital where time stops making sense. Julia stared at the blinking monitors, counting her baby's breaths when she wasn't counting her own. Brandon hovered between acting brave and looking like he might break, rehearsing 100 impossible what-ifs. It wasn't that they hadn't survived public humiliation before. They'd fought each other and the world for a sliver of happiness. But nothing they'd faced, not one mess on reality TV, had prepared them for this. Their infant son hooked to wires, a parade of doctors with grim faces, and the threat that nobody would say aloud. A pediatrician pulled them aside. The words weren't gentle, not the way you'd hope. Damon was sicker than they thought, possibly in for the fight of his life. Julia's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She replayed every late night in the farmhouse, all those times she and Brandon screamed about trust, privacy, boundaries. But nothing had ever made her feel quite this helpless. Their old fights used to be about who loved who enough, or who let who down. Now it was the fear that their whole future might be decided by a line on a monitor. While Julia and Brandon clung to each other in the hospital, Twitter and Instagram exploded. People posted old photos of the couple smiling with Damon, fans and critics arguing under every comment thread. Some sent prayers, some sent blame, and a few even dredged up Julia's cheating confession from last resort, like the universe was keeping receipts. The doctors came in every hour with updates that sounded half like hope, half like a warning. They listed out worst-case scenarios, pneumonia, sepsis, a recovery that could take weeks. Even then, neither Julia nor Brandon could sit still. Julia kept checking medical charts she didn't understand, Brandon texting relatives who'd only ever seen them fight on TV. Every whispered huddle of nurses became its own horror movie scene. Did someone sigh too loud? Did they look scared? Was it about Damon? It's hard to admit, but panic makes old wounds sting sharper. Julia, tired and scared, couldn't help remembering all the times she'd accused Brandon of running off to his mom instead of facing problems together. Standing by that hospital bed, she wished drama were as simple as it had been. A secret text, a hidden key, a cold dinner. Instead, nothing made sense except survival. She squeezed his hand so tight, hoping he wouldn't disappear when things got too heavy. Hospital drama strips away every defense. Julia watched the nurses work and wondered if it was her fault, if her own stress had somehow spilled into their son. Brandon kept apologizing for things that had nothing to do with medicine, but that's what happens when you're desperate. You try to find control, even when none exists. Online, fans started picking sides, each with their own theory. Some pointed to Brandon's parent-pleasing ways. Maybe that's why the couple couldn't catch a break. Others dug into Julia's past, guessing aloud if her anxiety or past betrayals set up this stress spiral. The wild internet rumor mill churned faster than the hospital's air vents. People fought over who deserved more sympathy, as if this nightmare could ever be fair. In quieter moments, nobody argued anymore. Julia stared at old ultrasound pictures, remembering when doctors said she'd never have a child, when even a healthy pregnancy felt out of reach. How much fight could she be expected to have left? Brandon, looking older than his years, kept circling back to regrets that wouldn't stay buried. Maybe if they'd moved out sooner, maybe if they'd never let TV in, maybe if every loyalty test wasn't public record. But maybe doesn't mean much next to a surgeon's report and crying you can't fix. Doctors warned them that Damon's lungs were under attack, dangerous infection aiming for the weakest spots. Each hour the numbers on the screens looked either a little worse or a little better, and every small change felt criminally important. The nurses fussed over tiny tubes and blinking lights, whispering about whether the next blood panel would offer good news or another new fear. Hospital staff kept suggesting rest, but Julia and Brandon sat beside their baby, counting the green lights, hoping every beep was a good sign. Through that haze, family trauma started leaking in. Julia replayed how Brandon's mom had once tried to micromanage every decision, casting doubt on Julia's instincts as a mother. Now, facing this real test, Julia wondered whether she'd missed a sign, whether doubting herself in the past made her hesitate now, whether all those what-ifs and should-haves mattered at all in the face of a single midnight emergency. Even love stories built on drama rarely survive weeks of pure fear. Julia and Brandon were now fighting not against each other or the world, but for a future they couldn't picture. One blink from a monitor, one word from a doctor, one more sleepless vigil, and everything could change. If you've ever watched someone you love slip through your fingers, even for a minute, you know that raw helplessness sticks longer than the most viral drama. Nobody could predict if this couple would crack under the pressure, or if every messy battle from their past gave them the strength to face this one. While the hospital's white noise hummed on, Julia caught Brandon looking at her in a way she'd never seen before, not with blame, but with a kind of desperate hope. And right then, the nurse reappeared at the door, holding a chart that could mean everything or nothing at all. When news broke that Damon was in the hospital, social media went ballistic in a way only true reality TV fans can appreciate. People who had spent years armchair coaching every mistake Julia or Brandon ever made now had a new battlefield, and the energy online was louder than an airport tarmac. Instagram swelled with prayers and frantic "stay strong" stories, while Twitter fed on the tension. Everyone had a theory, and absolutely nobody wanted to miss the spectacle as it unfolded in real time. Some people genuinely worried for the family. You could feel their panic through the screen. Photos of little Damon in happier times started circulating again, smiling, blonde, completely oblivious to how many strangers plotted the details of his parents' love life. But for every well-wisher, there were commentators who treated the whole thing like a weekly event to binge and review. Someone posted, "This is karma for all those years of farm drama." Within minutes, that comment picked up a dozen replies, half defending Julia, half blaming Brandon, and a few asking who would leak updates from the hospital first. Public disaster made fans pick their battles. Every old argument resurfaced. Possession of spare house keys, front page again. Julia's past cheating? Nobody was letting that one slide by. The internet kept hitting rewind on problems that never finished airing, making new judgments with every clip. Of course, the couple's own socials didn't help. Julia posted a blurry shot of Damon's foot in the hospital crib, the kind of image designed to invite speculation but not break news. Brandon stayed quieter, only liking a few sympathy comments. This digital silence sent Twitter detectives into overdrive. Was he hiding? Was she putting on a show for sympathy? Was their marriage as patched up as they claimed? Opinion blogs spun stories faster than the tabloids ever did. Suddenly, everyone who once obsessed over Julia's farm struggles or Brandon's cringeworthy mom moments decided that either parenting stress or public pressure broke the family, but nobody could agree which one deserved more blame. Some wondered if reality TV had taught them to be authentic or only taught them to act for attention. A few self-labeled lifers swore they'd seen true feelings in that hospital hallway selfie, eyes puffy, clothes wrinkled, the obvious whereof people stretched to their limit. Still, skeptics called the whole thing a PR bid for goodwill, suggesting that their posts were less about connection and more about control. Online, the comments reached a fever pitch. One moment, people united behind the hashtag #PrayForDamon. The next, they tore each other apart over which parent deserved a do-over. The flip-flop kept everyone glued to every tiny update. Was Julia still following Brandon's mother? Did Brandon delete the post from last year? Would Ron or Betty drop a silent like or tell-all story to the tabloids? It's strange how strangers feel ownership over other people's heartbreak. Some fans took the opportunity to project their own fears, announcing what Julia and Brandon should do, as if any of us are experts on crisis. Some asked, if you were in Julia's place, would you let cameras back in after this? Others wanted Brandon to pick a real side for once in his life. The public face of the couple had always been filtered, partly real, partly defense mechanism. Deep down, was love acting as life-saving oxygen, or dragging out another performance for 5 more minutes of sympathy? Facebook groups went wild speculating if Brandon finally earned his stripes, or if Julia would forgive the old betrayals with her son's health on the line. What if she left again, this time for good? Some viewers had no patience left. It's about the baby, not you. While others sent long DMs, begging for updates like distant relatives. There's something uniquely surreal about living a crisis with a million onlookers ready to judge. Every choice the couple made became a headline for someone desperate for a storyline. Even the way Julia placed her hand on Damon's leg in a photo got scrutinized. Was it exhaustion or a silent cry for help? Some people tracked the shadows under her eyes like eagles, searching for clues about their next move. Certain castmates joined in, posting vague thoughts about praying for our favorite family, without naming names, quietly farming clout from the situation. Meanwhile, a few ex-cast members openly defended Julia, calling out fans for bullying at the worst possible moment, but that only stoked more division. Even relatives who once seemed eager for screen time now ducked the spotlight, unwilling to offer real statements, just enough distance to avoid blame if it all went sideways. No matter who you believed, Damon's vital signs started jump roping between cautious hope and new red flags. One inpatient night, a nurse's worried look sent Brandon out to the hallway, where he punched a wall in frustration, while Julia sat with tears streaming down her face, still refusing to leave her son's side. Their exhaustion turned public sympathy into speculation. Were they holding each other up this time, or falling apart like in the old days? Suddenly, a cryptic post dropped from Julia's burner account, hinting at finally learning who's truly there for us. Fans caught the post before someone deleted it, and the guessing game only grew. Did that mean help was coming, or did it signal another crack in the fragile truce between Brandon, Julia, and their families? While the outside world battled over hashtags and hot takes, everything inside the hospital room slowed to pure, private agony. Minutes crawled. Julia sat so close to Damon's crib that her forehead nearly touched the guardrail, lips moving in silent prayers, eyes searching for any flicker of improvement. Every time Damon's hand twitched or a machine beeped with a new warning, her entire body jolted awake. The old confidence, the tough-as-nails TV survivor, the city girl who stood up to farm chores, the woman who once faced down critical in-laws on live television, she vanished. In her place was a mother stripped bare. No scripts, no edits, just the raw fear of losing the one person she never thought she'd have. The silence only made her mind louder. Julia replayed all those nights she'd lied awake in the old house while Brandon and his parents whispered in the kitchen. Even after moving out, the echo of those arguments followed her. Was she ever really welcome in this family? Would Brandon stand up for her if things truly broke? He had always promised to protect her, but now every broken promise clanged in her head at the worst possible moment. It's wild how a crisis brings out everything you thought you'd buried. The betrayals, the jealousy, those keep-you-up fights about boundaries. All of it resurfaced now, heavy and sharp. The difference this time, though, was absolute honesty. When Julia finally spoke, her words came out hoarse. She admitted something she'd never say on TV, how powerless she felt, how the past never quite let them move forward, how loving someone through pain does not erase the scars that came before. Brandon, pacing and wringing his hands, wanted a manual for how to be the husband and dad Julia needed. He was scared to leave the room, yet couldn't stand still. He kept apologizing, not for the present, but for every old mess that brought them to this moment. The look in his eyes wasn't fake regret. He knew he'd spent years bouncing between Julia and his mother, rationing loyalty as if he could please everyone, never fully standing with one side. Now nobody but Julia counted, and it finally cut through his old habits. They started talking. Not about the future, but about every ugly memory they never wanted to relive, how Julia's trust in him cracked with each secret, how Brandon's silence made her feel invisible, and how both had learned to survive on stubbornness alone. The irony was bitter. They'd always been good at making up after fights, but nobody taught them how to comfort each other when forgiveness couldn't fix things. In those sleepless hours, every practical lesson hit home with a sting. When life comes with public commentary, acting for the crowd gets exhausting. They learned too late that performative comfort doesn't soothe a child or heal a partner's anxiety. Fans love a comeback, but real relationships don't play out in neat episodes with clear winners and losers. Every old episode proved that running from problems or holding grudges keeps the cycle spinning. Julia realized she used to view Brandon's loyalty issues as a personality flaw. Really, it was fear of letting anyone down. Brandon saw Julia's outbursts and escape plans as rejection, but it was always a plea for partnership. By the third night in the ward, the doctor delivered a new update. Damon's infection was responding to treatment, but his recovery would take patience, no sunrise miracle, only slow progress and 1,000 close calls. Relief mixed with dread. It sounded like good news, but both parents knew nothing was guaranteed and setbacks were lurking around every corner. Hope was fragile, trust even more so. All the while, the internet spun. Julia's probably threatening divorce again. One thread argued. Brandon should pick her over his parents and stop hiding. Meanwhile, others said the couple's love was real, battered but unbreakable. You could see it in the way they never left their son's side. For every snarky tweet, there was an equal and opposite outpouring of support, as if the world couldn't decide what ending to root for. The private pains sometimes slipped into their public selves. Julia's next update landed somewhere between gratitude and devastation. "We're still here," she wrote, not promising improvement, not asking for pity, just staging a real moment in a digital fishbowl. Some fans saw exhaustion, others detected anger or defeat. But anyone who's faced nights like these knows, your feelings turn to survival, then to numbness, then back to hope, all in the same hour. No denial, no hyperbole, no fake lessons about sudden strength. The truth was, old wounds didn't magically forge character. They make you tired and force you to choose. Julia and Brandon had to look each other in the eye and decide if they would let this break them, or if they'd use years of messiness to face the hardest fight of all. They couldn't escape their history, but maybe they could finally stop letting it write the rest of their story. In a twist nobody saw coming, an unexpected visitor showed up, a nurse who used to watch the show, softly whispering that families can heal from uglier scars, that children can bounce back, that forgiveness is messy but possible. Sometimes, hearing hope from an honest stranger goes farther than any Instagram DM. Julia clung to it as if it was a lifeline. All week, the family hovered in this new tension. Julia caught herself almost texting Ron and Betty, the in-laws who haunted half her nightmares, but stopped. Was it pride, fear, or exhaustion? Brandon hovered on the edge, caught between the urge to beg forgiveness for years of passivity or blame that felt too old to matter. This stalemate echoed every bad pattern they'd lived before, but now with a spotlight none of them could turn off. As Damon's monitors pinged and each lab result brought fresh suspense, Julia's defenses finally collapsed for good. She turned to Brandon and said quietly, "I don't know if we're okay, but I need you to be with me, not with everyone else." Brandon faced his history, swallowed the urge to hedge, and promised, out loud and in public, to put Julia and Damon first, every time. It was a declaration loaded with more risk than any reality TV fight, more honest than any apology given for the cameras. Nobody outside that room knew what those words meant, but both of them understood. Whether this night ended in triumph or heartbreak, it would not end in distance. For the first time, the possibility of something new felt real, a family forged by pain, fear, and the decision to stop repeating old mistakes. The story wasn't over, the odds weren't fair, but there was no going back to the way things were. And as Julia finally closed her eyes to rest, her phone buzzed again. A message from a relative she hadn't spoken to since the last family meltdown, hinting at support or more drama to come. Would this next chapter spark old heartbreak, or light a path forward? Even if only by inches? That answer was still out of reach, but the family, finally huddled close in one room, was ready to find out. The truth about quiet nights in a pediatric ward is that nothing feels safe, not even after the doctors bring better news. Improvements come in tiny steps. The fever finally breaks 2 degrees, the oxygen numbers edge up, but nobody celebrates. Julia sits upright, her eyes never leaving Damon, still asking silent questions at every twitch. Brandon's voice is shot from so many whispered reassurances and apologies, trying to hold everyone together at the seams. When sunrise floods the room through thick hospital glass, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a truce, life promising nothing, only that there is another day to try. New rounds of tests come. Some numbers scare Julia half to death, some bring blessed relief. She doesn't let herself hope out loud. Instead, she counts each breath her son takes, then glances at Brandon, who is trying to hide how much sleep he's lost staring at those same monitors. People want a story where the family beats the odds all at once, but reality is so much messier. There's hope, yes, but it lives in between every what if and why us. They aren't out of the woods, and anyone who claims they are isn't paying close enough attention. Social media waits for a single "it's over, we're home." But for now, Julia writes back to strangers with lines like, "We're still fighting. Please pray for us." Each time she posts, she wonders who's reading, the fans who believed in them, the critics waiting to twist her words, or relatives wondering if this will finally change the script for good. Outside, the internet churns as always. One moment the comments beg for an update, the next, trolls demand to know who's at fault, as if pain has a culprit. It's easier to judge someone else's problems than face your own, and watching 2 flawed parents beg for their son's life invites every possible opinion. Yet, in the smallest moments, Julia sees kindness online too. A mother who once lost a child sends a recipe for sleep. An old castmate shares advice about hospital food. Messages pour in that make her weep. The line between audience and friend becomes as thin as the tube giving Damon oxygen. The past never quite disappears. At times, Julia's mind drifts to the farm, to screaming matches, to the moment she confessed to breaking trust on television for millions to see. She remembers every insult hurled her way, every keyboard warrior who called her names, every relative who thought she'd give up. Strangely, the worst trauma and the wildest scandals look tiny in the glow of real crisis. When you face your worst fear, the rest blurs. You realize how much of life gets wasted on the noisy stuff meant for onlookers. There's a bittersweet clarity in pain lived out loud. Julia and Brandon know their marriage doesn't look pretty. Their fights are messy, their makeup scenes awkward, their loyalty tested in public and private. The internet saw them fall apart and patch back together a dozen times, but nobody really knows what kept them trying. In these endless hospital hours, the reasons become obvious. You keep fighting because you can't bear to stop. You forgive not because it's easy, but because the alternative is too lonely. No easy resolutions, no miracle cure as credits roll. Damon's lungs get stronger, then weaker, then stronger again. Every small improvement demands fresh courage. Even now, as family and old friends tiptoe in and out, offering help and awkwardly avoiding old wounds, the couple pulls tighter together. Julia worries she's aged 10 years in 2 weeks, but admits the exhaustion feels different now. Brandon hasn't called his mother for advice, not once, since they landed in the ER, a quiet revolution inside a man known for giving away his backbone one apology at a time. The outside world wants a happy ending, but Julia feels the bigger story happening inside her own chest. The endless cycle of exposure, trauma, public scandal, and private hope isn't just reality TV. It's survival, and it's brutally ordinary. Every family watching, every exhausted parent scrolling the comments at 3 a.m. knows this feeling. What no one teaches you growing up is how to grit your teeth through slow hope, how to say, "I'm scared," without it sounding like defeat. Some nights, Julia walks downstairs for a coffee refill and finds herself staring out the window, eyes raw, thinking, "We'll never be the way we were." Brandon sometimes wants to retreat to safe silence, but he stays. He holds Julia's hand longer, refuses to answer old family group chats, and learns slowly that putting his wife first means backing her far beyond the edit of a TV episode. As Damon inches back toward recovery, the secrets and drama that nearly pulled them apart years ago lose power. Julia admits, at least to herself, that forgiveness isn't neat, nor is healing. The rumors and old receipts won't wash away overnight, but the crisis forges something harder to shake, a weary, shared history no public shaming can erase. They have seen the haters, the doubters, and the nosy relatives, and they're still holding on to what matters most. Even the ending isn't an ending, it's a question. Nobody knows which new challenge will hit next, a relapse, a family demand for reconciliation, a flashback scandal, or simply the quiet exhaustion of trying again tomorrow. Julia posts a simple story, Damon's hand wrapped around her finger, no hashtags, no online war, nothing but the raw truth of still being there. And thousands of comments flood in, not for drama or closure, but for hope. A hope that maybe, after all this, a couple defined by chaos and scandal can find steady ground. What comes after the hospital? Will old enemies become allies when it matters most, or will a single news stress unlock another round of headlines? Tomorrow could bring new medical updates, another round of family drama, or maybe a surprise no one's ready for. Sometimes the only thing more suspenseful than a crisis is what it leaves behind. If you're ready to find out whether a family glued together by reality TV and hidden scars can really hold on when the spotlights go out, you won't want to miss what comes next for Julia, for Brandon, and especially for the newest little fighter in their wild family story.